It's 1940. German troops are marching through Paris. The city is occupied. Life changes overnight, but in the factories of Citroën, something unusual is happening. The Nazis order vehicles, and the French comply, but not entirely. This is the story of how a car company helped fight back by pretending to cooperate. Let's dig into it on this week's episode of The Internet Says It's True. Well, hey there. Welcome back to The Internet Says It's True, where every week we learn something that sounds made up but is really true, part of the WCBE podcast experience, available on all podcast platforms, also the NPR app and the new WCBE app. My name is Michael Kent. This is episode 238. Thank you so much for tuning in. Couple production notes. You may have noticed the audio got a little wonky on the Yap section last week. Sorry about that. I did the best I could in post, and I just had some equipment issues on my end. So hopefully we've got that fixed, because later on we'll be talking to Tristan Miller, and they are in New Zealand. So hopefully we've got a good connection and we can make that work. I'll do my best to make it extra super listenable for you. Also, make sure you're helping out by leaving a review on the Apple Podcasts app. That's super easy to do. You just open the app. You can do it on the phone or on the desktop app. You go to my show, The Internet Says It's True. You type it in. You go down to the bottom. There's a place where you can give it 5 stars. But don't forget to leave some words, because for whatever reason that helps the algorithm much more than just leaving stars. And it doesn't even have to make sense. You can just write like some random words and it totally is fine. And plus I get a kick out of it when people do that. So do that, please. We've been sitting at 4.9 forever, and I'm trying to get it up to 5 stars. So do that. Also, if you're a super fan, you love the show, and you feel like you get a lot of good content out of this, don't forget to join the Patreon. That's patreon.com/Michael Kent. It does get old for me to continue to plug these things over and over, but it is really important to keep the show successful and to keep the lights on, so to speak. I did build a studio from scratch in my home to be able to do to continue to work during the crazy 2020, 2021 years, and you know, I'm still keeping it going just because of this show and because you all continue to listen. So if you want to join that, it's patreon.com/Michael Kent, and lots of fun bonuses for you there as well, including a discount on merch. You can get merch at theinternetsaysitstrue.com. You click on merch. We've got some cool t-shirts. I can attest to the quality. I've got a couple. I like to wear them to promote my show. And there are some mugs too. And according to my buddy's wife, they're the good kind because you can fit all 4 fingers in the handle of the mug, which is fantastic. Makes for a good mug. So with all of that said, another quick production note for you. If you've listened to this show, I've done a few episodes with French pronunciations. I'm not going to try. I've tried to listen to how to pronounce this factory name. I think I'm very bad at French R's, which is like a whole, so it's like Citroën. But I'm going to probably just say Citroën, and that, just understand that that's what it is. So it's Citroen, but it's the E with the little dots over it, so it's Citroën. That's what we're talking about. Let's get into it. In the strange world of wartime obedience, there's a concept that feels almost like a practical joke, but it's deadly serious, and it's called malicious compliance. That's when someone follows an order to the letter knowing full well that it will cause chaos. So imagine you're a caterer and you've been hired to make sandwiches for an army that's on the other side, right? Like maybe you've been invaded or something, but then you make the sandwiches, but you make them with so much salt that no one can eat them. It's a passive aggression with high stakes, but in wartime, this becomes a subtle and powerful form of resistance. For a non-wartime example, imagine that, a new supervisor at work enforces this strict policy that says no personal items on desks, no photos, no mugs, no plants. And so then the team removes everything, including sticky notes and desk organizers and calendars. Productivity tanks, the supervisor is forced to reconsider the policy. Or maybe the boss tells the junior employee, make sure that you CC me on every email. So then the employee starts copying the boss on every email, including lunch orders and password resets, and the boss gets overwhelmed because there are hundreds of irrelevant emails and begs the employee to stop. Basically, we're talking about passive aggressiveness. And in the instance of those workplace examples, it's pettiness, right? It's petty revenge, passive aggression. But in the example of wartime malicious compliance, it could be the difference between you keeping your life and losing it, but you still get to do your part and stick it to the bad guys. In today's story, we'll eventually explore one of the most brilliant examples of this carried out by the French automobile company Citroën during the Nazi occupation of France. But first, let's take a little tour of malicious compliance through wartime history, because this kind of sabotage didn't always involve explosions. Sometimes it just involved being very, very helpful. Let's go to Poland during World War II. In the small town of Malicious, the Nazis had taken control of the local rail network. Trains were vital to the Nazi war effort, delivering weapons, troops, and horrifyingly people to concentration camps. The Germans relied on Poland's extensive rail system, and they issued strict orders to keep the trains running on time. And so the Polish railway workers complied, they did what they were told, and they followed all the rules, but somehow nothing seemed to work right. Trains were constantly delayed, cargo shipments were misplaced, deliveries missed their marks. Why? Because the railway workers were deliberately screwing things up, but very carefully. They would reroute trains just slightly off course, which caused delays of hours or even days. They'd switch out paperwork so that shipments ended up at the wrong destination. And they were masters of claiming technical difficulties, everything from broken brakes to faulty switches, all carefully engineered to create purposeful bottlenecks. What made it so effective was that they weren't breaking the rules. They were following the rules, just in a way that exposed every flaw in the system. In one documented case, a supply train was delayed for 2 full days due to what was described as a, quote, signal failure near Krakow. The failure was that a signal lever had been intentionally set at an incorrect angle, but only by a few degrees, and it was enough to confuse incoming engineers and require an inspection, but not enough to be immediately flagged as sabotage. Then across the border in the Netherlands, Dutch civil servants pulled off a different kind of sabotage. When the Nazis demanded that Dutch officials identify Jewish citizens in government registries, many of the clerks got sloppy. Entire filing systems were so-called lost in office relocations. Ink was spilled, accidentally of course, across critical pages with names, and those names were there but spelled just wrong enough maybe to make tracking them difficult. Officials claimed administrative overload and chronic filing errors, and they complied, but their compliance was full of these speed bumps. Even in German-occupied Norway, bureaucratic compliance became a shield for resistance. Clerks dragged their feet, refiled paperwork, and used outdated forms. Permits were delayed, approvals were bounced from one desk to another, and the Nazis couldn't prove anything was being done wrong on purpose, but they also couldn't get anything done. In all these cases, the resistance wasn't armed. It didn't require explosives or secret radio transmissions. It required knowing how a system works and helping it fail from the inside. Now let's shift our attention back to France. When the Nazis invaded France in 1940, the country fell in just 6 weeks. Paris was occupied, the Vichy regime took power in the south, and the German military took control of factories, railroads, and communication systems. If you were a factory owner, you had 2 options: collaborate or resist. Many resisted, and one of the most famous resistors did it from inside a car factory. The Citroën automobile company was already well known by the time of the war. Founded in 1919 by André Citroën, the company was famous for engineering innovation. They were the first to mass-produce front-wheel drive cars, and they had a reputation for sleek, modern designs. But by 1940, Citroën was no longer just a car company. It was a Nazi asset. German officers took over the factory and demanded trucks. Lots of trucks. The man in charge of Citroën at the time was Pierre-Jules Boulanger. Boulanger had been running the company after André Citroën's death and was known for his quiet, calculating leadership. He didn't shout, he didn't make speeches, but he was absolutely determined not to help the Nazis. Boulanger understood the stakes. His factory was under German supervision. He and his workers were being watched. Any obvious sabotage would result in imprisonment or worse, so he chose a different path. And this is where the story of Citroën's malicious compliance begins. Coming up after the break, the Nazis asked for trucks, and Citroën delivered. But what they didn't know was that every single vehicle came with a built-in time bomb, hidden in plain sight. We'll be right back.
Hey, I'm Cliff Baumgardner.
And I'm Harrison Stewart.
If you're like us, you probably grew up watching the Discovery Channel classic, Mythbusters.
From rocket cars to chicken cannons, Mythbusters proved there's no question too big, too small, or too ridiculous to put to the test.
Now we're going back to rewatch the show from episode 1, and we want you to follow along. Join us as we revisit every single myth, moment, experiment, and explosion from throughout the show's legendary 14 seasons. Subscribe now so you don't miss one.
If you love listening to this podcast every week and you want to show your support, that would mean a great deal to me. You can do that by becoming a Patreon member. We've got members at all levels, whether you want to pledge $1 a month or $10 a month. Just think about the value that you receive from this show. And if you like the histories and the stories that you learn about or the jokes that you hear, and if you think that they're worth it, consider signing up. For that, you get every episode ad-free and a week early, access to bonuses like the unedited videos of the guest appearances, and 20% off all merchandise. You can sign up today at patreon.com/Michael Kent. That's patreon.com/Michael Kent.
I'm John DeSando, host of Back Talk. This podcast is an extension of the long-running, award-winning movie review show, It's Movie Time. Back Talk features additional content and banter with guests about new movies. If you want more insight and information about what's playing now in theaters and online, find Back Talk at the WCBE Podcast Experience on WCBE.org. You'll be happy you did.
There was a time that humans used 100% organic products as healing balms and moisturizers for their skin. Well, I've partnered with an awesome company that wants to get back to those times. Fatco sells organic and responsibly made tallow-based skincare products. For centuries, humans used tallow in skin moisturizers and healing balms, but unfortunately, the topical application of these fats seemed to stop around the same time that animal fats stopped being considered part of a healthy diet. A lot of modern skincare products do more harm than good by stripping your skin of its natural oils. Let's change that. You can try them out now at fatco.com and get 15% off your order by using my promo code INTERNET. Go to theinternetsaysitstrue.com/deals for the link. So how do you sabotage a vehicle without touching the engine, breaking the brakes, or raising any suspicion? Citroën's engineers had an idea, a brilliant, subtle idea. They changed the oil dipsticks. That's right, you know the dipstick, right? The thin metal rod that shows how much oil is in your engine? Citroën engineers lowered the fill line, the full line on those dipsticks. So when Nazi mechanics checked the oil, they filled it up to that line thinking that was correct. But it wasn't. The engines were running low on oil. Not empty, not enough to immediately notice, just enough to slowly, inevitably destroy themselves. Over time, the trucks began to fail. Engines seized. Vehicles stalled on supply runs. The German army couldn't figure out why their brand new Citroën trucks were breaking down, and all the while, the French engineers at the factory just kept nodding along and saying, "We're doing our best." It was a masterclass in quiet sabotage, and it wasn't the only trick up their sleeve. Boulanger reportedly hung warning signs around the plant in German, signs that looked helpful but directed German soldiers away from sensitive areas. When the Nazis demanded production updates, the Citroën office delivered fake spreadsheets showing overinflated numbers. The trucks didn't exist, the numbers did. Factory workers created fake breakdowns on the line. They claimed parts were missing or they reassembled components just slightly out of alignment. One former employee later recalled that accidents on the factory floor were staged so frequently they had to rotate who got fake injured just to keep it looking organic, and yet no one was arrested. The Gestapo suspected Boulanger, but they couldn't pin anything on him. He was nearly executed several times and he spent periods of the occupation in hiding, but he survived. After the war, Boulanger was hailed as a hero. He helped relaunch Citroën as a post-war brand, and one of his first major projects was the Citroën 2CV, a small, durable car designed to mobilize rural France. It became a symbol of independence and renewal. The car that helped rebuild France had been designed by the same team that years earlier quietly wrecked German supply chains. When people talk about resistance during wartime, they often think of spies and soldiers. But resistance comes in many forms. Sometimes it comes in the form of a factory manager who says, "Yes, sir," while quietly tanking your war effort. In the end, it turns out you don't always need firepower to fight tyranny. Sometimes all you need is a dipstick. The internet says it's true. It's time for Yap Yap with me and a friend. Today I am talking with Tristan Miller. Tristan is an internationally touring comedian, actor, and mental health advocate. They have a new comedy special out on May 15th, that's this week, called Manic Impressive, which will be available on YouTube and wherever you stream comedy albums, but you can also buy it on Bandcamp, and you can help support Tristan. You're in New Zealand right now.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
It's so good. I was just saying, this is my first time talking to anyone in New Zealand. That's super exciting for me.
Well, good. I'm glad. I mean, I would highly recommend you, if you can afford it, come down here and visit. It's a fantastic place.
My only experience, Tristan, with New Zealand is I played GeoGuessr a lot. Have you ever played GeoGuessr?
I've never played GeoGuessr.
So GeoGuessr is a game, it's a browser-based game where they drop you on like a Google Street View somewhere in the world and you have to guess where you are. And,
yeah, I've seen those videos of the guy doing it in 10 seconds or
it's
whatever.
insane. Yeah, some of these people are incredible at it. But so I feel like I've, seen parts of New Zealand through that. Doesn't really count at all, but I really want to go. So you're originally from where?
I'm originally from Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Yeah, I started doing comedy in New York and lived there for a little over a decade. Yeah.
And that's amazing. And we met in Hershey, Pennsylvania, not too long ago.
Yeah.
And what precipitated this move to New Zealand? Because you're not just there visiting; you live there now.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I'm working on getting a visa to let me stay longer. But yeah, have you seen what's going on lately? Is basically what it comes down to.
I love it. We all say we're going to do it. You actually did it.
Listen, I visited here as well in 2023, and that came out of also lockdown. I was like, the minute they open their borders again, I'm down there because I can't deal with any of this, particularly being in New York during lockdown. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I'm like, I should probably talk to a therapist about how that's affected me psychologically.
Yeah.
But so I went down here then. And then I moved back to the States and I was like, I don't think this is for me, actually. I think, if you've ever spent any time, a long period of time in another country, it kind of ruins the United States in some ways, where you're like, I don't know if I like how we do this or that, the other thing. So there was that aspect to it. But then also, like, I love New Zealand comedy. I love New Zealand film. And the people down here are just, some of the nicest you can find. And being from Minnesota, I'm like, yeah, I need someone to get on my level of passive aggressive niceties,
Yeah. And, I talked last week with our guest, Josh Quillen, about how like people pretty much are the same anywhere you go. People are great. It doesn't matter where you go. There's a thing that people love and you find out what that is. And it's very similar to the things that you love. It might be different food, but they love it in the same way. And people are nice everywhere. How do you feel? Have you been doing stand-up in New Zealand since you've been?
Yeah.
How do you feel the audiences are compared to back in Minnesota or New York?
Sure. In New York, I mean, you have some of the best and worst audiences in the world in New York, because it's either like people if you have a show in New York where people have intentionally showed up for comedy, it's going to be fantastic. But if you're doing like a bar show or whatever, and people are just there to like be on a date, and then all of a sudden a comedy show is happening, it's just the worst experience. But Americans in general, I don't know if you know this, we have a reputation of being loud, which is true. When I was visiting in Ireland with my family, everyone thought we were Canadian, and we're like, oh yeah, because of the Minnesota accent. They're like, no, because you just speak so quietly.
Oh.
Yeah. But But as far as audiences in New Zealand go, they're a lot more reserved, just in general. And then also there's this fun thing that they do in a comedy show here where they have an interval, like everyone goes, "Here's an intermission. Let's go grab some beers and then come back." So the sweet spot is the 2 spots before the intermission and the 2 spots after, because after that, people are too drunk and they wanna talk.
Mm.
So they're either, like, really reserved and very polite, and then they kind of build to where a normal comedy audience would be, and then it goes back to, like, now they wanna chat. They're a very chatty audience, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but also, like, something that you have to, like, recalibrate for,
Right. They're not doing it to
and
be rude. It's just
Mhm.
a cultural difference.
I think there's that, and then also I think in general, a lot of, audiences have just gotten chattier since lockdown.
They
We forgot
have.
how to behave,
Absolutely,
and
they have.
and I'm just like, "Guys, the thing I always say is, like, "I can hear you."
Yeah.
You know
You're not
that.
watching TV. Yeah. This
You
is
can't
real.
do one of these,
Yeah.
flick up,
I've been saying
Yeah.
this, and I feel vulnerable to tell people that, yeah, the audiences are talking more during my show because it makes me sound like they're not enjoying the show. It makes it sound like,
Mhm.
well, why are they doing that? And in fact, I've had, particularly in colleges, audience members just like getting up and leaving, 40 minutes into the show. And
Mhm.
I hear it from other entertainers as well. And I'm trying not to be offended by it. And it's not because they're bored, I don't think, because that's when the show really ramps up.
Mhm.
It's because we're so used to life a la carte now. And we
Mhm.
pick and choose what we want to do by the minute. And it's like, okay, we
Yeah.
did this. Now let's go over and do that. And you
Yeah.
don't feel that obligation or commitment to sitting and being quiet for an hour or whatever it might be. That's my theory on it. But it definitely was, the line of demarcation was those formative 2020, 2021 years that I talk
Mhm.
about on this show more than I should. But I think, and you alluded to this a moment ago, there is a trauma that we went through.
Yeah.
And especially if you were in New York, there was the lockdown was much more extreme there, and the numbers were more extreme there. There was a trauma that we collectively went through, and 5 years later, we're still feeling that. And when I talk to comedians, this is sort of a common ground that I have with comedians. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'd love to chat about comedy, but we do have a show to get into. So
Oh,
before
sure.
we get into my topic, there's a segment of the show where I ask my guests to give me a fact that they think maybe I haven't heard about. So do you have a true fact that you think there's little chance I've heard before?
Yeah, I think it's a low chance, but there might be a chance you've heard of this. So Mel Blanc,
Mel
the
Blanc,
guy
the
that
voice of Bugs Bunny and everything
Mhm.
else.
Absolutely. He was in a coma for a while. I don't know if you know
I
this.
did not know this.
Okay. So this is the most insane thing that I've ever heard in my life. And it makes me kind of go, well, I think miracles are possible. Like, who's to say? So he was in a coma for months, and I think he got into like a car accident or something. That's not the fact. But the fact of the matter is, he was out cold, and they were playing a Looney Tunes episode had come up on the television, and the doctor was in the room, and he made a little noise or something hearing the Looney Tunes. And the doctor went, I'm just, we're just screwing around, let me just go, hey, Bugs. And Mel Blanc, not spoken in months, goes, what's up, Dak? And then
No.
they used that to coax him out of a coma.
That is amazing. I've never heard that. That's like the movie Awakenings or something. Like
Oh,
that
yeah,
is
for sure.
like one of those things. Have you seen the video of the people where they play like music and these people have been catatonic forever and they just
No.
awaken?
Ugh.
Yeah, look for this on YouTube. I'm not even sure what you would look for, but these folks who are probably in like a senior living community type thing are being,
Mhm.
there's a guy that's just hasn't talked in forever and doesn't really correspond with people, and they put headphones on him and start playing this like 40s jazz music, and he starts bopping his head around and coming alive, and they're like, we haven't seen this in this person. I love that stuff. And you think about it, like that's in somewhere in Mel Blanc's head there was a responsibility to be Bugs Bunny in that moment, and we're like, hey, this is me, they're talking to me. That's
Absolutely.
that's an amazing true fact. I love it.
Yeah.
You
Power
win
of
with
art,
that
baby.
one. That is crazy. All right, so let's get
Yeah.
into this one. The episode was kind of a downer story, but not in the way you think. We'll just get into it. And for this first question, we always play for a joke. So if you get this wrong, you have to tell me a joke. If you get it right, I will tell you one. I did not find a good joke for this week, so we're going to revert to if you get this right, I'm going to pull from my joke book stash, which
Hell yeah.
sometimes can be very, very problematic. So we have to be careful about what pages we go to.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
here it is. What clever act of sabotage did Citroën engineers carry out on vehicles built for the Nazis? So, backstory. The Nazis invaded France. This is a French company. I mean, sorry if that was a spoiler. It's my bad. But they said, hey, this truck company has to still make us trucks for the war effort. And they practiced malicious compliance by doing one of these things. A, they filled engines with sugar. B, they installed faulty brakes. Or C, they lowered the oil dipstick full line.
I think they filled it with sugar is what I'm going to go with.
The answer, they lowered the dipstick full line. So what they did, and this is brilliant, they lowered the line on the dipsticks. And so right out of the factory, there was no way for the Nazis to know that they had done this act of sabotage because the trucks are going to run for a little while and they're just low on oil. So eventually they when the mechanics filled the oil, they underfilled it and the engines would seize up and these trucks would just stop in the middle of nowhere. And they could never really prove that this was being done on purpose. The Nazis probably just thought these trucks suck, So yeah, I love it.
It's not German made.
Yes, I love the idea of malicious compliance. It's just
absolutely,
it's wonderful. Some people comply by lowering the fill line. Some people move to New Zealand. There's different ways of malicious compliance.
Absolutely. Again, it's that classic passive aggression, only on a level that is unbelievable. 100%.
Oh, God. So I have a story of malicious compliance of my own. I think I've told this story on the show before, but for new listeners, you haven't heard this. When I was in college, I used to party at Ohio University, which is about an hour and a half from Ohio State where I was. And the OU was known for being very, very aggressive with towing cars that were parked in the wrong spot. And so inevitably my car was towed and it cost me $70 to get my car out of the impound the next morning or whatever it was. That same company, Athens Towing, hired me a few years ago to perform at their Christmas party in Athens. I charged an extra $70.
Oh, that's fun. That's very good.
And I told them a story during the show too, and they loved it.
That's
so
very
I tacked
good.
on $70. Now we're even. Yeah. That was a vengeance I had carried from like 1999 all the way through. So, do you have a joke for us?
Yeah, it's a nice little dad joke from a joke book, and it's what does Europe and a frying pan have in common?
What?
They have grease on the bottom.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah,
I like
yeah.
it. Grease
Nice
on
little
the
bit of
bottom.
word. Yeah, nice
It's
little
good.
bit of wordplay.
I love that. I'm going to tell that to my Greek friend. He'll
Good.
probably like it. I don't know. It's hard to tell what he likes because Greeks are so stoic that there's
That's
very
true.
little there's very little emotion happening there.
There is a-
He's like, oh, it's a very funny joke.
I used to live in Astoria, which is a Greek heavy population.
Oh,
and,
is it? Yeah, the diners.
Yeah. And my neighbor at the time, I was like, hey, how'd you end up here? And he just goes, back home, I break the law. And he said it in a way that's like, what can you do?
Break
know,
the law, we come to
I
America.
break the law, and then I come here, I work as a tractor,
I love
And I was like, wow, you really just are like, okay, this is my life. American dream, baby.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, that's good, and especially good because I didn't find a joke for this week, so that made me
Good.
happy.
Well, I sabotaged myself on purpose, much like those French people did with those cars.
Oh, there we go. For the second question, we are going to play for an authentic French war era truck, assuming I can find one and I can afford it. and I'll ship it to you in New Zealand.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I'll ship it. If I can buy the
Yeah.
truck, I can ship it. No problem.
That's true,
Assuming I
yeah.
can afford these things. That's the catch.
Maybe there's one lying around here.
There could be. Check the dipstick. There are two major auto manufacturers in France. One of them is the Stellantis Group, which makes cars like Citroën, Peugeot, and DS. Which one of these is the other? Is it A, Renault, B, BMW, or C, Aston Martin?
Aston Martin, I believe, is British. B and W. I'm gonna go with A.
A, Renault is the correct answer. You're right. Aston Martin is British. BMW is German.
Yeah.
So the correct answer is Renault. And that means you have won an authentic French war-era truck.
Hell yeah.
If I can find one and ship it to you. If
Yes.
it's affordable. And, times are tight.
I'm expecting a little Hot Wheel, is what I'm...
It's amazing. So, as a comedian, I don't mean to intrude with this question, but when you move to New Zealand, do you do like a job, or are you living off of comedy?
So right now, okay, so it's a little tricky.
Because I
at the
know,
moment.
first of all, let me say, I don't mean offense by that. I know you're a fabulous comedian. I've watched your stuff. But the idea of moving to a completely different country and starting an entertainment job seems such a risk to me.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. It is. And I'll be honest with you, at the moment of recording, it's looking like I'll probably have to head back to the States and recalibrate, which is unfortunate, but it'll New Zealand will still be here. But the way it works
But the States might not be. That's the problem with this plan.
Honestly. Well, okay, so I have a little plan, which is I'm going to, in Minnesota, you can get an undergraduate or certificate for free, and I'm going to go home to Minnesota and then do a semester-long program where I can learn to be an auto mechanic, and then those are in high demand everywhere. So I'm like, cool, I'm set.
Topic to this episode.
Exactly. Now I know what not to do. Lesson number 1. But yeah, I would say that it is a pretty big risk, and the way visas work down here is, unless you're like marrying someone or or going to school, you have to find a job to sponsor you, which has been the hiccup.
Okay.
In as much as well as currently in New Zealand, they have a pretty conservative government in as well, and consequently, they've been in a recession for the last 2.5 years. Whereas last time I was here, it was going pretty good, and I was like, oh, cool, I'll just figure it out. But at the very least, I'll be back here to tour all the time. I love it down here. But but since I have been in between jobs, I haven't been saying that. I've been saying I'm a full-time content creator. So, it's just there's no money coming in from the content.
You know what? All of content is built on spec. There's never money coming in. It's never guaranteed.
Absolutely.
But you got to keep doing it anyway, which is why we're on episode 238 of this show.
Absolutely.
So for question 3, Tristan, we always play for the internet says it's true sticker. It's 3 inches, it's square, and it's sticky. And if you get this correct, you get a sticker. I'll put it on the bumper of the truck.
Good.
Here's your question. Which Nazi official was placed in charge of vehicle production across occupied territories?
It would be crazy if I just knew this without hearing any of the names.
That
would be troubling. That'd be troubling on my part, actually.
No, I mean, maybe you just read a book recently.
That's
I wouldn't.
true.
I wouldn't assume. A, Heinrich Himmler. B, Ferdinand Porsche. Or C, Erwin Rommel. One of these was in charge of vehicle production across occupied territories for the Nazis. It was Himmler, Porsche, or Rommel.
I'm going to go with C, Rommel.
The answer, Ferdinand Porsche.
Oh, a little on the nose.
And yes, it is that Porsche. The founder of Porsche Automotive was deeply involved in vehicle engineering for the Nazi regime. Isn't that crazy? So, you see these amazing cars. A lot of those automobiles have a genesis in Nazi Germany. It's kind of
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have gone to the moon. We wouldn't have Hugo Boss. We wouldn't have Doc Martens. It's this crazy,
I didn't know
weird,
about
like
Hugo Boss or Doc Martin.
Doc Martin. Dr. Martin was definitely a Nazi, and then also Hugo Boss was like all of the Nazi uniforms were designed by, I believe it
Oh,
was Hugo Boss.
I wasn't thinking. That makes sense. I wasn't
Yeah.
thinking design. I was
Leave.
thinking cologne because I had Hugo Boss
Oh, sure.
cologne. So I was like, oh, did he create the cologne that the Nazis wore?
Yes,
They all
we
smell
all smell so good.
amazing.
Yeah. Let
They're
me
horrible
just.
people, but they smell really good.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, they did all the what people in the colonies and Britain call the Nazi costumes as opposed to uniform. Which I think
Wow.
is diminutive and
It
funny.
is. Yeah.
Um but yeah, so that makes sense that Porsche was involved. Like it's got a long tail in a weird way. And I mean, I think we're obviously seeing the repercussions of that currently.
Yeah.
Ooh,
And in
not
some
to bum
cases
people out.
through literal family, like in the case
Mm-hmm.
of Elon Musk, like it's literal family. And I believe a
Yeah.
lot of our leaders, if you go back far enough, anywho,
Well, because it's like, where did all these people get their wealth?
their wealth. And speaking of wealth, everyone's celebrating the Pope, and that's where all that Nazi money was to the Vatican, right? So
There's this thing, I was thinking about it because I was watching a YouTube video about conspiracy theories,
yeah.
and
Is
a
that a
lot
conspiracy
obvious.
theory or is that real? The fact that I just said.
I think it is real,
Okay.
and the way it relates to conspiracy theories is like obviously often people are like globalization. It's the Jewish people that are in charge. I'm like, it's the Catholic. Like if you're gonna think any religion is in charge, it's maybe the religion that has had so much money for so long. Anyhow, but yeah, I think a lot of it got funneled into the Vatican because a lot of it was like also artwork that like got reappropriated and then resold, and like it's
That's
basically
that's
money
true
laundering
too.
scheme.
I
Yeah.
just did a very quick Google search,
Mhm.
and it's a subject of ongoing debate, is what this basically
Mm.
says. The Vatican,
Gotcha.
of course, has denied this, but they also, that they would. But there's a Bigelow report declassified in '97 that
Mhm.
says that 200 million Swiss francs that had been impounded that were Nazis ended up in the Vatican, and they held that. That's about $295 million at today's prices. So wait, 200 million Swiss francs is equal to 295 million American dollars? Man, their value the franc is held.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, francs maybe are like a coin. I don't know. I don't
I
know.
I believe francs are like the
Like a penny?
they're the they're like the dollar,
Oh, well then
like
that's
1 franc.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of let's see, 350. This one says in 1945 the Vatican had confiscated 350 million Swiss francs, and it says that's 1.5 billion in Nazi gold for safekeeping. Yeah, anyway. Well, we've gotten off the plot here. But so yeah, Ferdinand Porsche, next time you see a Porsche riding around, know that guy was the dude who was in charge of vehicle engineering, and
Mhm.
probably the guy, and we don't know this, it's not in the story anywhere. I looked for this. Probably the one who was the one that went to the Citroën factory and said, "Hey, make more trucks. For us,
Probably, yeah.
you have to do this." Okay, so you're 1 for 3. We're on to question number 4. We're going to play for a souvenir from New Zealand. So when you come back
Okay.
to the States, if you come back, bring,
Mhm.
something. It can be a sticker or a magnet. I don't care. Here's
Okay.
your question. Oh, and if you get it wrong, then it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Oh, no, if you get it right, then I'll give you a souvenir from Columbus, Ohio. I don't know.
I would love that. I
Jenny's
just went
ice
through
cream.
Ohio, like, I would love to visit Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus is very nice, and most people who
Mhm.
come are pleasantly surprised.
Mhm.
And it's one of those
That's
cities
always
it's a big city, but it doesn't feel
Mhm.
big.
Mhm.
And so it's got everything that you need, and other than a professional baseball and football team, and but it's got great restaurants and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you come play a gig around here, I'll come. Number
Mhm.
4. Which one of these was the primary method of sabotage used by Polish railway workers during World War II? Was it A, derailing trains, B, deliberate misrouting and slowdowns, or C, replacing coal with sand? One of these is true. So, yeah, deliberate misrouting, derailing trains, or replacing coal with sand.
I'm going to say deliberate misrouting.
You are correct. It is deliberate misrouting and slowdowns. Polish railway workers complied with Nazi orders, but used technicalities in rerouting to delay or misplace shipments. So malicious compliance at its best.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. One of my favorite things about, like, I love to see malicious compliance because it's another way of saying, like, petty revenge without, like, it's passive aggressiveness, but with a purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It's a fun topic. And I've been really enjoying, like, finding examples from history of people doing this.
It's nice to give people a little taste of their own medicine, you know?
Absolutely.
It's nice.
Yeah. Especially when, like, with some of these, especially the story of this week is that it unfolded slowly, right? They knew that they were doing it, but it wasn't going to take effect for quite a while after they did it. And there are stories of people making, that they made, like, people make ammunition, and they made the ammunition purposely not work. They, would create duds, and there's very little way of knowing that until it gets fired, and then it doesn't go boom. So, all right. Well, you're batting 500, and this last question is for the full ball game. So, Tristan, if you get this right, I'm going to have you back on the show if you want to come back on. If you get it wrong, you're banned for life from this program.
Okay.
If you were tasked with performing comedy for an enemy regime, how would you practice malicious compliance?
I think I would, similar to you, overcharge them. Number one.
Yes. Okay.
Because, like, that way I'm taking money away from bad people. That's always been my, like, well, of course. And then I think I would make sure I'd get the money up front. And then I would claim travel issues and not show up and send someone else in my stead who I knew was a terrible comedian. Just like,
I like that one.
Just like
That's
someone no one would enjoy, who's, like, not, like, offensive or anything, who's just, like, not very funny yet.
Just not enough that it's like they know it's a joke, right? But it's the slow burn of the dipstick being wrong, right? It's just kind of like, do you think that was on purpose? Like, later on, like on the drive home, they're like, do you think that guy was bad on purpose? Yeah.
Exactly.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. That's a wonderful, correct answer. So you are welcome back on the show
Thank you very much.
anytime. This has been a lot of fun. Yeah. I want everyone here to go to Tristan's website. Their website is, let me find it again. It is Tristan J. Miller. That's TRISTANJ Miller.com, because in just a few days, May 15th, the special Manic Impressive will be able to stream YouTube, wherever you get your comedy albums. That album will be there. And I can attest, I watched some of your stuff. It was actually, I watched it before I asked you to come on this show. You were introduced through our mutual friend, Glenn. And I had followed your account after meeting you. And I don't know if you've heard this or not, but there is a George Carlin-esque quality to your delivery. And there's something about the vibe. I don't know. It's not the joke. It's not the writing or anything. It's the vibe. And it might be, I don't know what it is, but it's, here it is. I know what it is. It's the theatrics. You have a background in theater, and early Carlin especially was very theatrical and expressive. And I think that's what I'm seeing. And I really enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's the first time anyone's made that comparison, and that's very flattering. I appreciate it. I think what
you're welcome.
You are probably keying in on is the classically trained to speak in, public speaking training, where you go up at it in a sentence and then you come down, like that sort of thing.
Yeah, and Carlin, that sounded like Carlin. That was like a impression that you just did, basically.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's what it is. It's theater kid meets comedy, and it works really well. You can also purchase the album on Bandcamp. Is that available yet, or is that going to be available this week?
Yeah, you can pre-order it now. Yeah,
pre-order. It's called Manic Impressive. Tristan J. Miller, it has been a pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And I hope everything works out and you get the ability to, even if you have to come back to the States for a while, to make New Zealand work long term.
Yeah, hey, me too. Thanks.
That's it for this week. Thank you so much to Tristan Miller for being my guest, and thanks to you for listening. Here's the voice of a kid who practices malicious in compliance.
Thank you for listening to The Internet Says It's True. To listen to episodes ad-free and a week early, support us on Patreon. You can do that at patreon.com/Michael Kent. If you learned something just now that you didn't already know, go to the Apple Podcast app and leave us a review with 5 stars and a few words. That helps us a ton, because that's how the algorithm works. I don't know what an algorithm is, but just do it! See you next week for a brand new episode of The Internet Says It's True!
The Internet Says It's True would like to thank the Patreon subscribers whose monthly contributions help to make this show possible. Sean Brown, Joshua Endress, Dallas Ray, Bryce Swanson, Eugene Anderson, Jim and Joanne Martin, Mitch and Andrew Joseph Kemplin, and the show's official Emperor, Kick Track. The show is written and produced by me, Michael Kent. The theme song is by Finite Music Forge, and all audio clips in this episode are used for education and commentary and used under Fair Use Title 17 USC Section 107. You can listen to past episodes by searching for The Internet Says It's True wherever you get your podcasts, and you can see bonus content at patreon.com/Michael Kent.